Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Tunnel Vision, show brought to you by USCFootball.com. I'm your host, Keely Eure, joined by Ryan Abraham and Shotgun Spratling. We have a fun show for you guys today. We've seen 11 practices of USC's fall camp, so we'll share our takes and our thoughts and our observations. We'll talk about USC's quote-unquote most physical week this week. Clay Helton previewed the week as the most physical week USC will have in August. They're going 4 days of full pads and a scrimmage on Saturday. So we'll talk about what we've seen. We'll also preview scrimmage number 2 in the Coliseum on Saturday. Shotgun, you and I were there for the first Coliseum practice, or scrimmage, I should say. So we'll give you our thoughts on that. Injury updates. There's been some movement, and Shotgun, you are very studiously taking notes each practice, each presser about those updates, so we'll be sure to get those to you guys. And you can call us 512-4-TUNNEL. We love hearing from you. Our intern Micah is standing by to screen your calls. And wherever you're watching, Periscope, YouTube, or Facebook, please put your questions, comments, and concerns. We love hearing from you guys. And hopefully later on we can put your comments on the screen. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty, so we'll try and fix that so we can.
I got a little blue screen of death in front of me. See if it recovers, and if it does, we'll put your comments up on the screen on Facebook and YouTube.
No one likes the blue screen of death. Also, You can tweet at us #TunnelVision, and I'll put your tweet up on the screen. You don't have to mention our handles; just put #TunnelVision, and I will pull it up. But guys, like I said, 11 practices in for USC's fall camp. I guess first off, Shotgun, you and I noted how the energy felt a little off on Saturday in the Coliseum, but it was interesting how USC bounced back on Monday for another full pads practice. It seemed like they responded well.
Yeah, that's a nice way to put that. They didn't have a good scrimmage on Saturday, and then they did bounce back from it. And one of the things that I thought was a really a nice upgrade and a nice adjustment was changing practice, and not just going and saying, okay, well, we had a bad practice, but let's just get back to the routine. On Monday, they came back, and instead of their normal routine that they have and the normal practice plan that they have, they decided to scrap 7-on-7 and kind of the O-line, D-line one-on-ones, go straight to team, get more opportunities, more reps. Now, it wasn't full tackle the entire practice, but there was a team tackle period, and the offensive line came out after kind of struggling on Saturday with running the ball and having inconsistency there, had a 70-yard run on the first play from Vavae Malepeai, and then just adding extra team opportunities. And one of the things Clay Helton said is they need to get some more opportunities, more live reps for those young quarterbacks. And they got a ton of opportunities on Saturday. And I don't think that the coaches were very happy with what happened on Saturday, just the overall energy, the vibe of that scrimmage in the Coliseum. It just didn't fit the location and the being in the Coliseum, the setting of it. I think, Keely, is the way that you put it on the podcast.
Yeah, the environment.
Yeah, the environment just didn't feel like a Coliseum scrimmage. It just felt like, ho-hum, it felt kind of like a spring practice that just happened to be in the Coliseum instead of having that intensity. And I think they bounced back, and Monday and Tuesday both, I think there was much more intense practices.
Yeah, I liked Monday was kind of fun. First of all, we don't get to see the offensive linemen up close very often. They did a cool drill. They brought out the offensive tackles over right in front of the media pen. They brought the safeties and the nickelbacks, and they let them do pass rush drills. So if you ever watch one-on-ones with the line, they usually go like tackle, guard, center, guard, tackle. It just went tackle, 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 tackle. It was just back and forth, and they had guys rushing on the outside. And we got to talk to Clay McGuire about that a little bit. He said it was really mostly for the defensive backs. They were trying to, simulate what would be happening in a game when you're rushing off the edge. But he said it was really helpful for the offensive linemen as well when you ever have to kick out and pick up that blitzer that's coming in off the edge. So that was a really fun kind of drill. And like Shotgun said, they mixed practice up. You didn't see the 7-on-7. They did more kind of team stuff, and it gave some more opportunities for some, some thud, some tackling. But I thought it was more physical. I would have liked to see like the Oklahoma drill, the Trojan drill they call it. We haven't seen that yet. And then on Tuesday, yesterday, another full pads day became the Michael Trigg show. So that was fun too. So there's been some fun days of practice, I think, after the sort of letdown in the Coliseum where you didn't see some of the stars come out and play.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was one of the things that, there were some guys limited. Drake London seemed to be a little bit banged up, but he didn't do anything. Keaton Slovis only played a couple drives. Brett Nealon only played a couple drives. Chris Steele only played a couple drives. And maybe partially there's some injury issues there. But I said on the Family Feud pod that it felt like that carried over into the rest of the team. Just not having those stars out there to kind of, to push people a little bit more. It felt like, after those guys weren't practicing or, came out pretty early, it was pretty lackadaisical the rest of the way. There wasn't the same intensity that you would expect. And when you don't have Drake London going against Chris Steele, that's going to be an intense matchup.
Yeah.
Chris Steele talked a little bit about that today, how, it's a Biletnikoff versus a Thorpe. They want to be finalists for that. They want to win those awards. But that's what it is. It's that mano-a-mano type of battle that you had with Juju and Adoree and, some of the greats that USC has had. And when those guys aren't out there, I think it creates a completely different environment and different vibe to a practice when you don't have, those dudes that you look at and you kind of marvel at what they can do. And when they're going matched up, those are the type of things where you turn on YouTube, you want to watch, these unique and elite matchups. You don't necessarily want to watch the threes going against each other. Yeah. And that's what the practice, it felt like it just didn't have the energy and it didn't carry over, and I think that probably played into it as well.
Having Drake Jackson in full pads helped a little bit too, to see him. And Shotgun noted his very first play when we went up to the Aquatic Center perch to watch. He got a big tackle for loss on a run play, and it was just like, oh, Drake Jackson's back. I love it. I thought it was a great opportunity for Hunter Eccles and Giuliano Falanico to get some reps there, and I think both of those guys played well. I like what Eccles is doing out there, but they got options now. You put Jackson out there, you put Corey Foreman on the other side. There's some interesting options there on the edge for USC, but having him back gives you a little more energy, I think.
Yeah, well, Drake was fully acclimatized now. This is the first week we got to see both Corey and Drake together in a rep. What did you take away from that? I know a lot of USC fans are chomping at the bit for that.
Well, Corey was slowed a little bit because of that groin thing, and even just watching him do some of the defensive line drills, he just seemed like not quite there. But it's funny, like Shotgun noted, if you're watching practice and you see Corey Foreman, he is right next to Vic So'oto. And a lot of times, especially when Drake wasn't fully acclimated and couldn't do a lot of the stuff, he was right there too. So he's your most talented guy coming in on the defensive side of the ball. He's trying to be a sponge and absorb everything out there. But it was fun to kind of see them as bookends, because we're probably going to see that a bunch this year. But it was neat to see it in practice.
Yeah, I think it was great to see that opportunity for those guys to be on opposite ends and see with Tuli Tuipulotu and Nick Figueroa can be a dangerous front four, and especially in those pass rush type of situations. I think it's as important and actually more important to see what he did the day that he wasn't able to practice. So on Monday, when they came back and they had a better practice, I thought, and had better team periods, Corey Foreman wasn't available. He's been bothered by a little bit of a growing strain, Clay Helton said, and they decided to hold him back a little bit. Now he's been back the last couple of practices, but seeing him, how invested he is. And this is something we've seen during practices as well. When he's not in a drill, he is right beside Vic So'oto. And now with Drake Jackson back, when Drake Jackson's not in, he's right there in between those two guys. So, being able to absorb everything he can, like you said, being a sponge, but he's got to get caught up. Because he didn't come in the spring, and that's something that I asked Todd Orlando about it. He said he's doing a great job progressing, but because he didn't come in the spring, he's that much further behind and trying to play catch up. And he's doing a great job of trying to get as many mental reps as he can when he's not out there. So it's great to see how invested a number one player in the country when he signed with USC, that he cares that much.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times, the number one player, you can say you can rest on your laurels potentially, and that has not been the case for him. He has been grinding the entire time, trying to make a name for himself. And in the scrimmage, he was one of the guys that did stand out. He had a couple of pass breakups. He was in the backfield, with his pass rush a couple times. So he's a guy to keep an eye on. How quickly along can he get the full playbook and be ready to go by the time the season starts? Is he going to be in there for a subset, a sub package because that's what he knows? Or can he grasp everything and then be ready to whatever they throw at him, be ready to go?
Yeah.
Now, just jumping back to the offense, something we've been talking about on podcasts and on instant analysis, who's going to be USC's second receiving option after Drake London? Ryan, I know you are searching for another wide receiver guy to be your guy.
I need a man crush.
You do?
So I had one, like, coming out of high school, Kyle Ford. I don't think I can abandon him. Like, I just don't want to break up with him. Now, he had a couple knee surgeries, which, but he's looked really good. I think, what did Chris say? Chris Trevino says he looks like a tight end from the waist up. I mean, he is a bigger body out there. Now, maybe not as thick down low like some of the tight ends, but you just look at him, he just looks like a different dude, like, especially when we're from far away. Like, he looks wider than those other guys. But, man, his hands are so strong. The ball gets near him, and he snags it. He had some really great practices yesterday. He wasn't able to go with the team stuff. I wasn't out there today. I don't know if he was.
He did a little bit,
not
stuff. Full.
But to me, I mean, he's looked every part of being a former 5-star. And I know people forget about him because he's had the couple knee surgeries. He seems like he feels confident when I watch him running around. I don't see any hesitation. And, yeah, it is practice. But, man, he's going out and making plays, contested catches. So there's some guys you watch when they're kind of come back from an injury, like, yeah, I'm not sure that's going to end up working. But it's, I don't see any restrictions from him. So I think he's going to be great. I mean, Joseph Manjak's the one that everyone's talking about, and he's just like a ridiculous. The only time he didn't catch the ball yesterday when we were at practice is they were running drills on two sides of the field, and the tight end from the left side was hanging around the field too long, and Manjak cuts across, beats his guy. The ball's like a little behind him, so he has to like try to make this acrobatic catch behind him, and then runs right into the tight end who's from the other drill, who wasn't supposed to be there, and it jars the ball loose. So that was the only way he didn't catch a ball. But he's been good. I mean, Michael Jackson had an awesome over-the-shoulder catch yesterday. It was we know Taj Washington. Doesn't catch the ball every time, and I know receivers, you want him to catch the ball all the time. But man, he's so fast. He makes those moves like when he beats a guy on the one-on-ones, and everyone you could hear Gavin Morris and everyone on the opposite side. Ooh, he just made a move and burned a guy. But there's some really good options. But I think I'm going to be in the Kyle Ford camp to be out there and be the number 2 guy.
So all those guys you mentioned, I feel like all of them have had their ups and had their downs so far in camp. It's been inconsistent, and that's been the biggest thing. I talked a little bit with Seth Dagey about, how they're going about potentially finding that inside receiver or tight end, whichever one they decide to use. Who's going to be option 2, 3, 4 behind Drake London as far as the receiving options. Are they going to use 2 tight ends? Are they going to split Michael Trigg out? There's a lot of different options they have. Yeah. If Malcolm Epps comes back, he's a guy that could split out as well. So you got a lot of options, a lot of different styles of weapons as well. Gary Bryant Jr., we saw some positive things from him, being able to get in there and do a little bit of work today, in drills. Not fully back, him and Darwin Barlow and Keontae Ingram. Positive injury news there. All 3 of them back, doing some position drills, not back in the full team set yet. But you have a lot of different weapons, different styles with the speed of Gary Bryant, Taj Washington, and K.D. Nixon. The veteran K.D. Nixon in there. Kyle Ford's a guy that's been around for a long time. He's soaked up everything from Michael Pittman and Tyler Vaughns and those guys. Big body guy. So you got some different types of options, but everyone's kind of been a little bit up and down. No one has been consistent across the board outside of Drake London and John Jackson. John Jackson has been super consistent for them. Now, he's not the same athlete. He doesn't have the same size as some of the other guys, but he runs every route exactly how the coaches want. They, I talked to Dagey about him, and he said he's basically like a Swiss Army knife. We can put him in any position we want to, and we know that he's going to know exactly what he's supposed to do. He's going to run the right route. He's going to run the right depth. He's not going to be cutting things short. And I think so he's been the most consistent guy, but where everybody else has kind of been up and down. And one of the interesting things that Dagey said to me was that it just takes one practice. And he mentioned Drake London last year was struggling a little bit during fall camp and just wasn't able to get on the same page as Keaton Slovis. And then they had a scrimmage. All this, obviously, we never saw any of this, but had a scrimmage, and he makes a ridiculous kind of a throw was behind him. He goes back and makes a one-handed catch on it. And said from there, it just took off. His confidence took off, and it just took one play, one good practice. And I think we've seen that from Michael Trigg. Not yesterday, but 2 or 3 days ago, just making some plays, and you feel like his confidence is growing. And then yesterday has a monster day. The run that they put on social media today, catching and making, I think it was 7 different guys miss. Yeah. And maybe one or 2 of them twice. So it was a ridiculous run. And then he has another great catch, going up and mossing a DB in the corner. And you see his confidence grow. And Dagey says, some of these other guys, they just need that one day, one big catch, one one-handed play or whatever it may be to give them that confidence, and you'll see it kind of grow upon itself. So So I think that's what we're kind of waiting and seeing. I think a lot of those guys, Trigg has probably been the guy, at least this week, that's kind of stepped forward as a number 2 receiving option more than any of the other guys, with making some big plays and whatnot. Now, where he fits, can he block as a tight end? Do you split him out all the time? How much does he know the playbook? All those are still questions, but as far as playmaking, he's been the guy stepping up behind Drake London right now.
While we're on the topic of receivers, we actually got a question from Mark on YouTube who says, does Kyle Ford look like he's fully back to being the guy who dominated at the opening again?
Yeah, he was the MVP of the opening. There, right? Yeah, 15 touchdowns. That's why I had the man crush. I was like, dude, this guy's amazing. Yeah, I mean, he's it's hard to compare from a couple of years ago, like when he was in high school doing all that kind of stuff. But he looks as healthy as I've seen him since he's been at USC. It just seems like he carries himself with a lot more confidence when you're watching him out there playing. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that he was slowed the last couple of days, probably not a great sign. But if he's healthy, I think the knee stuff is going to be okay. Yeah, I think the sky's the limit for him. I think you're not looking at him going, oh, yeah, it just doesn't seem like to have it like he did before. For me, it looks like he's still got it.
Nasson on YouTube also said, how serious should we be taking Michael Jackson at wide receiver?
Take him serious, dude. Like he's legit. I mean, the Vegas guy, he's really good. I think he can help in the return game. He's making good plays all the time. And I think shockingly, like all of them, there's some ups and downs, but he's definitely had his share of ups.
Mm-hmm. Him being here in the spring has really helped push him forward, I think. He's a guy that, and Daggy mentioned him actually by name, as a guy when you turn on the tape, like you see, he just makes a spectacular play every day, whether it's, just leaving a DB in the dust or making a catch that he probably shouldn't make. He's kind of an Amon-Ra St. Brown light. And will he have the same impact that Amon-Ra St. Brown had as a true freshman? I don't know if that's the case, but the door is open. It's Drake London and question marks. So, and the thing that they're looking for is that consistency of production. That's the way that I believe Seth Daggy put it with me, is that, who's going to step up and produce day in and day out and going forward rather than having those ups and downs, the peaks and valleys. There are definitely a lot of talented guys that have high upside, but they want someone who's going to produce, and that's why Josh Jackson is a guy that's definitely stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean,
John Jackson, excuse me.
Yeah, and like Gary Bryant Jr. was looking great in the beginning, and then we haven't seen him for a while, so it's sort of like, what does Chris say? You can't make this.
Can't make the club in the tub.
Yeah. Can't make the club in the tub. Yeah. So I mean, the consistency of everyone outside of Drake London just hasn't been there. But the good thing is there's a lot of good options, and we've seen them all perform well. So you get one or two of them to stay healthy for the year, and they can be a consistent option for you.
And that's been one of the things for that group is just that's hurt the consistency is that some guys have been dinged up a little bit.
Yeah. Now, I've talked to Shotgun about this, so Ryan, I'm curious about your thoughts. We had a comment from Andrew who says, watch that video of Trigg, and there was some awful tackling going on. I feel like this is a case of identifying who is glass half full versus glass half empty. It's a camp video. I feel like you should just enjoy Michael Trigg making a fun play.
It's practice. It's fall camp. There was a bunch of freshmen out there, but this is a true freshman kid who flew all the way from Tampa, Florida to come to Southern California. He's trying to figure out where he fits in the world. He's a freshman in college and, makes a one-handed grab and then all of a sudden I guess I got to run and starts running and uses his big body and
guess I got to run now.
Bounces off some dudes and starts breaking tackles and just you're like, can't you? I just enjoy that. I think that's just a great play that, not everyone's going to make every single tackle every time. You don't look at that video and go, oh my God, USC is the worst tackling team ever. I don't think that's the take you want to take away from that. You want to go, Trigg's a big dude and he trucked some guys and that was fun.
And then carried some guys as well. And your comment, the way you put that, I got called about, now what did I do? That makes me think of Varsity Blues when Billy Bob gets the ball in his hand. He's like, oh, I got the ball, now what do I do? And he also carried some guys in the end zone of that play. So at the end of the play, Michael Trigg did look kind of like that. No, stop being so negative.
Yeah.
It's not like if it was a walk-on that did this against the first defense, that should be your take.
Yes.
That is the take. The defense is not ready. Look, this walk-on is doing that to them. When it's a true freshman, doing it against some other true freshmen that are trying to make a mark and over-pursuing a ball because they're trying to get out there, make a play, trying to do probably a little bit too much instead of breaking down, and there were several true freshmen in that play. Honestly, Kanai Mauga comes in at the very end and helps make the tackle, and Juliana Falanico was in on the tackle as well at the end. But besides that, I think everyone else on the play was a true freshman that gets a broken tackle, missed tackle on it.
Yeah.
So, and part of it also is he's 240 pounds, and Sierra Wright, being a true freshman, he's undersized. He's like 160 pounds, I think, and he tries to make a tackle, and he bounces off of him.
Yeah.
That's going to happen when you have 60 pounds on somebody or 80 pounds, whatever it is. So, I think that if you're looking at it and just going, this tackling's terrible, you got your priorities wrong with this type of play. When it's a highlight like this in a practice with all freshmen, you point out the positive because that's what you're looking for out of your freshmen, not necessarily just demeaning them, because of their poor tackling.
Yeah. You never would like anything from practice if this is the case. It's like anything that does someone good, you're like, oh, it sucks. The other side didn't do that.
The play where Trigg then later, mosses Prophet Brown. Are you going to blame Prophet Brown because he's giving up 5 inches to Michael Trigg? He had great coverage. He got to do a better job of getting his hands down. Or whatever it may be. There's always going to be a positive and negative every practice play when you're having a competitive period. So you can choose to look at it either way. However, I think it goes back to if it was a walk-on versus first team is much different than true freshmen making a great play against a lot of other true freshmen that are only going to get better. And that's going to be something that Todd Orlando and Craig Nivar are going to be in those guys' ears and in their butt during the film study going, this is not the way we need to tackle, and working on it and stuff. I think one of the things, and I meant to ask Todd Orlando, I wrote it down, and I forgot to ask him today, is that it feels like there's been a more emphasis on tackling. And Keely told me to hold my roll last week when I told her this, and said, let's see if it carries on to week 2. But I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you feel like there's been more of an emphasis on tackling, on the form of tackling, the angles of tackling? It just seems like every day we're seeing some different type of tackling drills, and maybe it's still too early, like Keely said, to see if they carry that on. But I feel like that's been a big emphasis for the safeties, for the linebackers, and for the cornerbacks.
Go ahead, Keely. I'll go after.
Well, I was just saying, when I said slow your roll, it was because we've seen USC have an emphasis on physicality in fall camp and up to when it starts to get ready for kickoff, and then they kind of take it back. That's what my comment was, because as everyone knows, the emphasis mock game week where it actually was pretty physical, and then we never really saw that peak that high again the rest of the season. That's what I'm referencing, Shotgun. But I do think, we've seen up close and personal Craig Nivar really talk about all the tackling techniques. Same with Dante Williams. So from other years where we've been able to stand out on Howard Jones, it's definitely a difference in that sense.
Yeah, it just fundamentally it looks like they're a better tackling team right now. I actually talked to Coach Harvey Hyde about this on our podcast on Monday, and he was out at the scrimmage, and he was like, I'm not seeing the kind of missed tackles that we would have seen before in some of these practice situations, and he felt like this looks like a team that was taught more fundamentals of tackling. So that was his, as a longtime coach, that was his take on that. And I would agree with him. It seems like that's not a big of an issue. So that's why I was like, overall, we've seen, I think, better tackling.
Yeah.
There was one play that was just some crazy highlight play. I wouldn't just, blame the whole defense.
Yeah.
They're all terrible at tackling.
And I think that it's there's been other plays where they're not showing those highlights, but there was a really great play. I think it was yesterday. Chase Williams was out in space against one of the running backs and just perfect form tackle on a play that if he misses the tackle, there's 15, 20, 25 yards to be gained. But just breaking down, he's a guy that has missed some angles in the past. I remember the Washington game where he missed one and turned into a big, long run. But seeing him out there, he's made a bunch of plays. I talked with Chris Thompson about it today, and I said, Craig Nivar is on you pretty hard. And he said, that's the type of coaching I want. I want to be coached up like that. So I think that shows you that the kids are really appreciating all the work that the coaches are putting in. And I think it's a good sign that was an issue last year, especially at the very beginning. And, we expected that after the break before the pandemic and everything. But they're addressing the issues. That's, I think, is huge, because it's been so many years, it feels like, where there seems to be just blatant issues are right in front and center, and just been like, let's go around that. Let's work on this other thing over here.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think they're really addressing. And the way they came back from Saturday's lackluster scrimmage and said Monday, okay, scrap the 7-on-7, scrap the flag football type stuff. Let's go full pads, and let's go, even though they're not tackling, they were thudding, but let's go full force, full throttle, and do live 11-on-11 stuff. Again, I think that's a great adjustment that we haven't seen in the past.
I think it's also a credit to the defensive staff and their mindset. I feel like a phrase we keep hearing when talking to them is that the team is fully, or the defense is fully bought into their style and their style of defense, their style of run and hit and being physical. I know Vic Soto said, what was your takeaway from the first scrimmage? And he said, our defense loves to hit. And so I think that's the difference too. I think you're having a whole side of the ball really emphasize being physical, and we're starting to see that. I think, and even Orlando said they were a little skeptical in the first couple games of 2020. He said there was a lot of trying to run guys out of bounds instead of just going and hitting. And so I think this is what's happening with a longer time with this defensive staff. So that at least is an improvement there.
Yeah.
But sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, real quick, I talked to Raymond Scott and Greg Johnson, recently, and man, both of them were talking about the culture that Todd Orlando was trying to install there, and just he's like, yeah, we understand it now, but it's run real fast, go get to where you need to go, hit people, blow stuff up. I think they kind of all understand that now, and if you're a defensive player, you can do the wrong thing and look like a hero, because you can I can run. I was supposed to go this way and I ran this way, but that's where the play went and I blew it up. Then you're like, hey, you look like you did exactly right. You did it completely wrong. If you're on the offense side and you do the way wrong thing, the quarterback throws it this way, you're this way, you look like an idiot. Well, you can make up for things on the defense, and he just wants everyone to go real fast, play hard, physical, and go hit people. And it seems like the players are responding to that.
I feel like Jamel Cook would excel in this defense then.
Yes.
Just go hit things, go fly around, and make a lot of plays. And that was what he was good at. Not necessarily being in the right place he was supposed to be,
right,
but being in the right place where the ball ended up.
Yeah.
It worked out that one spring camp.
Yep.
So as I mentioned, USC's second scrimmage will be in the Coliseum on Saturday. It sounds like this scrimmage will help determine the two deep for USC. It was interesting. Clay Helton said, but that competition might extend longer for USC's tackle competition, offensive tackles. But then I got to talk to Clay McGuire, and I was like, Clay has this timeline. Is that the timeline you want? And he said, I hope not. And so he said, he said the kids are making it hard for him because everyone is playing really well. And he says, but hopefully they don't have to go longer, because I think to him, he really understands the importance of establishing that chemistry with that five and the rotation, how that can impact people. But Shotgun, what have you seen in that competition? Who is your guess as to what the starting five looks like?
I mean, we've seen Cortland Ford back at left tackle this week. And we've seen Jonah Monheim playing right tackle with the first team, which, this is coming off the scrimmage, and we saw some adjustments. We said Monday, this is different. Let's see if it continues throughout the week, and it has. Now, Jalen McKenzie has, was been demoted to the second string this week, but he has also been getting some first-team reps. They continue to mix and match at different times in practice. So I think it's an ongoing battle, and I feel like that they're giving a really hard look at Jonah Monheim at right tackle and deciding, because I think Clay McGuire told you, Keely, that Cortland Ford is better on the left side and is more comfortable there.
Yeah.
So I think they want to see, okay, if he's not as comfortable on the right side, can Jonah be more comfortable there? How do we feel about it? I talked with Andrew Voorhees. Andrew Voorhees is going to be in the mix somewhere. Don't know exactly where. Brett Nealon's going to be at center. I know Andrew Voorhees is going to be at one of those other spots. The rest I feel like is up in the air. And I talked with Andrew Voorhees, and he said, I feel really comfortable with both Cortland Ford and Jonah Monheim beside him. He said he's got a great relationship with them. And he said, and this was something that Dante Williams said as well about the DBs, and someone else said as well, but he said we were able to spend time with each other during the offseason. And, novel concept, but they weren't in the past. So he said they, have been able to catch those freshmen up a lot quicker this offseason just because they've been able to hang out. They've been able, those freshmen can pick their brains and whatnot, when they're off the field, rather than everyone being kind of separated because of COVID and everything.
Yeah, I'm a big Jonah Monheim fan. And I feel bad because we make fun of that recruiting class, up and down, right? It was pretty bad. But, there's some real players that have come out of that class, like the Tuipulotus and Gary Bryant. And I think Monheim is one of them. Just such a personable kid. And when you watch him play out there, if you got to see the video we shot of the one-on-ones with the safeties, he did really well. Him and Cortland Ford both, I thought, excelled at those drills.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see what they do, because Cortland Ford was the dude in the spring, right? And then Monheim gets a week at left tackle. Looks really good too. Now they put Ford back there. Do they put Monheim at right tackle and McKenzie moves into guard, or isn't in the starting lineup? That would be, for Clay Helton to bench with a fifth-year player like that. We haven't seen stuff. Toa Lobendon was the love of his life. He wasn't going to bench him for anything. Are you going to bench a guy like Jalen McKenzie? I don't know. I think there's still some good options there. I think they probably, like 7, 8 guys that they feel pretty confident with. I mean, Justin Dedich is someone you could fill in almost anywhere. Does Jimmins end up being the right guard? And, Voorhees the left guard. There's definitely some options there. Just from what we saw in the spring, my gut says Cortland Ford's going to end up being the left tackle guy. But seeing Monheim there like 6 practices in a row or whatever it was, you're like, oh, maybe, they give him a pretty good look there.
Well, I asked McGuire, I was like, from an evaluation standpoint and just reporting, how much should we take away from each development we see in practice? And I mentioned how Jalen McKenzie was with the first team on Saturday in the scrimmage, and then he hasn't really been with his first team since then. He was like, it's something we do and we're rotating, so I don't know how much we fully take away from that. But I thought it was interesting. Eric McKinney asked him about, just the mental load for the 2 freshmen, Jonah Monheim and Cortland Ford, and how they're taking in the playbook, taking in flip-flopping sides. And he said that, like you mentioned, Shotgun, Cortland Ford is actually handling one spot better, and that's the left side, whereas Jonah can flip-flop from both and is at least handling that better, which I thought was interesting. And then the other note was that he was like, everyone mentions the tackle competitions, but it's still a competition inside as well. So that's something that we should watch out for as well. So I think it's just going to be an interesting battle to see who actually starts.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got returning starters at guards. You don't really at the tackles.
Return at 4 spots.
Yeah. But the left tackle is the big one, right?
Yeah.
Like that's why you're getting more attention on that. But the fact that there could be some switching, and Monheim, when I talked to him, was like, yeah, you just have your 1 foot forward, your other foot forward. He didn't seem to care left side or right side. He was just like, I don't know.
One of the big things for the offensive line, talking with Andrew Voorhees, Keely talked with Brett Nealon, talked with Clay McGuire, is they've simplified the calls.
Yeah.
So you have those 2 freshmen that you're asking to step in and be one of them be a starter potentially, and they've been able to catch up a lot quicker because they've simplified the calls. And the way it was kind of explained to me is that before, if a guy moves from one gap to another, each individual may make a call. The guard may make a call to the tackle, or the tackle may make a call into the center. Now it's just one call. Now, I don't know exactly who's making that call. It could just be Brett Nealon making all the calls, or, it could be passed down the line. I don't know exactly, how it's being done, but it's just one call. So, we're going to block this way. It's going to be a man-to-man block, a zone block. It's going to be a left to right, whatever it may be. But it's just one simple call, so the communication is across the board, and you're not having any mix-ups there. And I think that makes it a lot easier, a lot simpler on the young guys, because they can get that call from someone else, and they don't have to make a bunch of the calls themselves, that type of thing. So I think that's, has expedited them being able to jump into the mix. And I think that makes it a lot simpler, because the big question is right now, with the mixing and matching so much, is getting that camaraderie, getting that communication down. I feel like that makes it a lot simpler for the communication part of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Brett Nealon said there's a lot of chatter prior to the snap in previous seasons, and he said it's way simpler now. And then Clay McGuire said it was just an easy streamline. You don't have to overload the guys in that sense. I'm actually going to jump into some callers and then questions afterwards, because we have a lot of questions, so we'll get to that first. Let's go to our buddy Dave from Iowa. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, Tunnel Vision, Dave from Iowa once again. First off, I was kind of disappointed that Coley didn't call last week. I'm inviting him in to, call it. It's always great to hear someone from Iowa. But my main question is, Ryan, I heard of how, this season should be easier than previous seasons. And from that perspective, we should be doing a lot better, and therefore the brand of USC would be getting better. However, I'm just curious of, how is the brand going to grow with, us taking, losses to Oregon and, just losing players out of state or losing players in state? I'm a little confused of, how will the brand keep growing if players keep going out of state? Love to hear your thoughts.
Hey, Dave, thanks. So I think a lot of times the people are equating to how did you do right now to what the brand is. The brand is your history. The brand is everything that goes behind the 11 national championships, the 7 Heisman trophies, the kind of draw you get for television games, playing Notre Dame and in South Bend, all that kind of stuff. That's part of the brand. USC separately this year has a much easier schedule than what they were scheduled for last year. They're going to be favored in probably 11 of their 12 games. They probably won't win all 11. They should. I'm going to say they should. There's no reason USC shouldn't win the Pac-12 this year with the talent and everything coming back. I think they're going to do better this year just because you don't have Alabama, you don't have Oregon, you don't have Washington. All those teams aren't on the schedule. I think Arizona State might be a mess by the time USC plays them. I mean, I'm still waiting for that other shoe to drop. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. You got Utah at home. There's all Saturday games. It's set up really well. They could go 9-3 and still want to. It's still not going to be good enough because I don't think. I mean, they should be better than that. I mean, this should definitely win double digits this year, but that doesn't really have anything to do with the brand. It doesn't make the brand a little bit better if USC makes the Rose Bowl this year. It's like, or whatever. Like that's fine. Like you win the Pac-12, it's like okay, but they've won the Pac-12 like once in the last decade. That doesn't matter about the brand. Now you can deteriorate the brand over time, and if there was like 10 more years of this, and there's a couple 5 and 7 seasons mixed in there, yeah, I think you would hurt the brand. But for the most part, you can help the brand if you have like a bunch of good seasons in a row. But the brand is kind of what it is. It's based on decades, not just what the last couple of months or whatever.
Yeah, it's based on decades more than months. So the months of a season is not going to determine, but a decade of ineptitude is where they're at right now. So if they have another decade of that, then you turn into Nebraska.
Yeah.
And if you have a little bit more than that, then you turn into you turn into an SMU or something. So it's something that's continuous there. Losing the local players, that hurts. The local interest, I think, from the high schools. Like, yeah, you want to root for your teammate, you want to root for the kid that went to your high school, but you're building the brand in Texas. That's becoming much more of a USC territory right now in East Texas because of all the guys that they're bringing from there. So it's kind of a give and take in that way. But if they win, it doesn't matter. Now, if you keep losing, that's going to hurt the brand much more than losing some recruits. And if they win, then more recruits will come. That's, as Gerard Martinez will always say, if you win, they will come.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Dave. It's a Iowa fraternity because he's trying to encourage Coley to call as well. But we got someone from California next up. It's Adrian from the Valley. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me on the show. I just had a question, kind of like just backtracking off what he asked, because, the more I think about it, the more it's true. We have like a really big Texas connection nowadays, and there's nothing wrong with that. We all know the Texas kids can play football. But, at the end of the day, is this kind of a good thing since, I keep hearing there's talks of teams like TCU, Oklahoma State wanting to join the Pac-12, there's those talks of them merging in with us. I guess in the long run, wouldn't it be kind of good to kind of keep that base there so we can have those Texas kids that can say, oh, you know what, we could play in Fort Worth every year or every other year, get family to see us? Or do you feel like we just got to reclaim the West Coast? Because it seems like Oregon, Ohio State, and Alabama have just been coming in and plucking up the big guys. Like, I really am anxious to see where Ernest Green goes. Like, wherever Ernest Green goes, I feel like kind of will tell me what the forecast of the future will be for recruiting on the West Coast.
So you talk about the offensive tackle from St. John Bosco. I've got to see him a couple times in the spring, actually. Yeah, he's a great player. I still think you have to take care of home first, no matter what. I think USC's in a unique position right now because they just brought in a whole bunch of coaches from the state of Texas. And it's not just recruiting high school players. You're getting transfers that were recruited by these guys. You're not going to have people that, when you're getting a guy out of the transfer portal, there's reasons why a lot of the players are in there. And sometimes there are people that aren't great locker room guys. Maybe they didn't get along with the team. They didn't get along with the coaches. When you're getting Texas transfers and you have a couple of Texas staff members on your staff and they recruited those guys, they were in the locker room with those guys, they were in meetings with those guys, they can vouch for them like, look, we can bring him in and he's not going to disrupt our chemistry. That's great. But you can't do that all the time because you're just not going to be hiring, maybe you will, but you're usually not hiring new coaches a whole bunch of times and you're going to get their former players. The transfer portal allows you to do that for a little while, but I think that's a shorter window. I think long term, if this staff stayed together for the next 5 years, I think you would have to see the Texas stuff still happening, but not as much of an emphasis, and there would be a lot more emphasis in Southern California. Just my take on it.
Well, you want to be able to cherry pick from other parts of the country, but that needs to be the case. It needs to be cherry picking. You need to be able to close the door, close the recruitment of the local kids that you really want. It's not like all these kids are leaving Southern California and USC just like, we didn't really want them. You want a guy like T-Mac, Tetairoa McMillan, who just committed to Oregon. You want a guy like Mekhi Lemon, who committed to Oklahoma. Those are high-end guys. Now, they've done a good job of identifying weaknesses on the roster and going to the transfer portal and picking guys up. But part of those weaknesses are because you're not recruiting as well, and you've had some guys leave and different things. But you need to recruit better at the wide receiver position. You need to recruit better at the running back position. You can't rely on transfers all the time. At least I don't think you can now. We'll see how the transfer portal plays out. It could eventually, like, you can just get rentals at one position, but you're eventually going, similar to the one and done with basketball. That works out and can work out a good amount of the time. But you can also look at, a Duke program and, has been consistent and been getting those guys, and they really struggled this past year because one of the one-and-done guys decided he wasn't going to play the rest of the season. Those type of things, if you don't get the right guys in, it can really struggle. So it's easier to get the right guys in and get them into your program and have, your philosophies and your culture with freshmen and build them up, and they sit the first year and they play as our season progresses, rather than trying to bring in a guy to start for you immediately because he's a grad transfer or he's a transfer from somewhere else and he has 1 or 2 years of eligibility and it doesn't work out. And then you feel like you're in a hole at a position. So they need to recruit better locally, but you do want to be able to cherry pick from a place like Texas, and that's where the connections are. USC in the past was able to cherry pick from the Tampa area, from Florida, because they had those connections with Monty Kiffin, with Kenoto Hudson as well. So they were able to pick up guys like Nelson Aguilar and Leonard Williams. So it's going to be about where your coach connections are, more so than with the potential of expansion.
Thank you for the call, Adrian. We appreciate it. Well, the Iowa Beacon was sent out, and it was heard. And Coley is on the line. Hello, you're on Tunnel Vision.
Hi. Thanks for having me, Tunnel Vision. And yes, I saw the Iowa Beacon. It's state law if you get called out by a fellow Iowan, you have to respond.
Of course.
So my question is, gentlemen, Keely, Ryan, Shotgun, Week 0 opens. We're going to be watching college football in 10 days. What game are you going to be tuned into? UCLA plays against Hawaii, and Nebraska plays Illinois. There are a few others, but anything that you will be watching on Week 0. And thanks for your time. And anytime you want to come to Dyersville and play baseball in the corn, we'd love to have you.
Thanks. Yeah,
Thank you.
Shotgun would love that.
I've been to Field of Dreams. That's
Abby.
my Twitter avatar. It was so much fun watching, some highlights from that game. I didn't get to watch the game itself, but the MLB game there. But
I like the Week 0, just like UCLA get to play Hawaii at the Rose Bowl, and that's like their tune-up before LSU comes to town. So they get a little, they'll probably be a little vanilla. Hawaii be kind of a spunky team, but they get to play in Week 0, and then LSU comes in.
And maybe actually get a non-conference win.
Maybe get their first non-conference win under Chip Kelly, and then LSU gets to have their first game 3,000 miles away from home. Set up pretty well for Chip Kelly to go from no conference wins to maybe a huge one against LSU. But if you want to fight like coaching carousel stuff, Illinois and Nebraska, Scott Frost is in a world of hurt there right now. This seems, they got a new AD, and then they just had this NCAA scandal thing coming on. What was it? I forget what was their thing was.
Nebraska?
Oh, they were like having workouts during, coaching during the COVID, the shutdown stuff. So that's not going to be looked at well from his peers. But yeah, he could be coaching for his job in Week 0 against Brett Bielema coming back to Illinois. So that's an awesome Week 0 game.
Or if you read the Twitter account of the Illinois, Burt Bielema was their first post. The graphic was Burt Bielema.
Yeah, so that's a really good one. I mean, that's a Big Ten game.
Look, Week 0 games are always going to be devoured because you've just been waiting so long. So it's it's the same thing with college basketball. When they would have the tip off, the ESPN would basically have 24 hours. I'm watching the St. Mary's Gonzaga game at back in Georgia at 3 in the morning or whatever it is. So the Week 0 games, everyone's going to be watching and tuning in. But the UCLA one I think was interesting because of that. I've already picked them to beat LSU. So I've been telling everyone I think that they're going to win that game. So I got to see what they look like Week 1.
Including on Tunnel Vision,
Week
you made
0.
that prediction. Well, thank you, Coley, for calling. We appreciate it. One last caller, and then we'll jump into questions. It's a Peristyle podcast voicemail legend, if I do say so myself. It's Curtis from Moreno Valley.
Curtis.
Yep. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hey, everybody. I finally get the call. I usually work at this time, so I happen to be off and caught the show. So
Glad to hear it.
my question and statement is, what does the whole panel, and the peristyle think we're going to face offensively? Percentage. How often are we going to see drop 7 and drop 8 coverages? Nobody's going to play man against us. It's too dangerous to do that. No matter how talented the defense is, they have to play zone. These are soft defenses. Everybody's dropping back. And I really have a problem with drop 8. There's only 2 people coming. How come 5 people can't stop them? How come with 3 people, how come 5 people can't double people and break those guys down? Keaton should have more time to throw when they only send 2 people. Maybe they're coming from different places and they're not seeing where they're coming from. I don't know. But what do you think? We're going to see it all the time.
Well, thanks, Curtis. Yeah, I think Curtis has nightmares about that BYU game from a couple of years ago.
He still does.
That sort of was like the blueprint to like, hey, what should you do against this team? And it worked extremely well. I don't think we've seen it as much. And there's going to be some stubborn coaches like Utah a couple of years ago. Played a lot of man-to-man, and they got torched by Matt Fink. Stanford likes to do that kind of stuff. There's some teams that are just going to do what they do. When you look at the paper, you're like, yeah, we probably shouldn't do that against this team.
Yeah, I think Graham Harrell has said it best. He's like, the teams that normally play man-to-man all the time, it's hard to just suddenly switch into zone because you move in the wrong direction, you open up a big hole, and suddenly a Drake London over-the-middle pass turns into 20, 40, 60 yards. So it's not exclusively going to be that because I think USC has shown, they've improved from that BYU game. Keaton Slovis in particular has improved from that BYU game. Now, we've seen some of the freshman quarterbacks. There was an Isaiah Paul-Mao interception of Jackson Dart was very similar to where you're trying to make something happen. There's too many defenders out there. But I think, I don't think USC will face as much of it because I think the running game is going to improve. And I think that's a big part of it. You can drop 8 much more frequently if you can drop 8 much more frequently than drop 7 if you know that they can't run the ball against you. So I think that's a big thing. And I can't remember who was talking about it. I watched the video. I wasn't in the interview itself. But someone was talking about how, if you can run the ball, then the linebackers have to come downhill versus being able to immediately turn and sprint backwards into a zone coverage. And then Mike Jinks even talked about with the running backs, if they can pass pro a little bit better, identifying where that extra person is coming from. Do I need to stay in versus getting outside? And he said, hey, if we identify, a second earlier that, okay, there's no one coming, I need to get out and be an option on the wing, you take that will linebacker out, now you open up another hole in the zone. And those are the type of things that I think we should see from the offense this year. I think those small steps should finally, be realized in this offense that we were expecting last year. I think Keaton Slovis is going to be fine throwing into windows. He had a beautiful throw today to one of the tight ends over the middle where it looked like, it's one of those like movie plays where it seems like 3 different people have a chance to knock it down and it just fires it and it goes right through. It was in a zone coverage. I think Miller Moss has done a really good job, identifying some holes in the zones, and that's been his strength as far as a quarterback. I think Jackson Dart the last couple of practices has done a really good job of finding some holes in the zones as well. So it's something they're definitely facing in practice. They're not being blitzed every single play. It seems like a lot of times for those offensive linemen, they'll tell you that. But I think that they're going to be much better at it just with the improved development of the offense as a whole.
And I think Curtis's point about why aren't you blocking 3 guys? Shotgun brought up some of the communication issues that they weren't really. Everyone had their own thing. If you got 3 on 5, there's a breakdown in communication somewhere. A lot of times, if you're getting a guy comes clean, that shouldn't happen. If he beats 2 people, fine. But if he just comes clean, you're like, how does 5 people not stop 3 or even put a body on that person? So hopefully, with the better, improved communication, the simpler calls, that stuff like that won't happen. You won't have a breakdown where you drop all these guys in coverage, plus one of your 3 defensive linemen breaks free and gets after the quarterback.
And Gary had a comment that said drop 8 up the wazoo. which I thought was interesting because Wazoo was one of the teams that tried to play man against USC and just got torched by Amon-Ra St. Brown. And they were like, what is going on? Like, Amon-Ra St. Brown was on a different podcast and was just like, what are they doing? Why are they trying to play us, man? Like, if any team, why are you playing us, man?
Makes sense. Well, thanks, Curtis, for the call. We appreciate you. Well, it's almost the top of the hour, and the boss man wants a tight show, so we're going to do some rapid-fire questions here. Gorilla on YouTube says, Trig and Manjack start week 1, question mark?
I'm going to go with no. However,
Why?
I think they'll be in the mix. And now Manjack is a guy we've seen getting a lot of first-team reps, and it's interesting. It's been 14, 15, 16, and then 13, 14, 15 at times for the numbers, with that first group. So those freshmen, being Manjack and Mike Jack, are both getting some opportunities right now. I think a little bit of that is Kyle Ford being a little bit banged up. And then, we'll see when Gary Bryant gets back where he is in the mix as well.
Yeah, I say no, but we'll see them. But just they're not going to be first-team guys.
Victor says, how are you guys ranking the quarterbacks right now?
I'm going to go Slovis 1.
That's strange.
Yeah. It's pretty. I think it's pretty close. Like Dart was definitely the darling of the spring. I think Moss is probably, if we're 11 rounds in, I think Moss is probably ahead on my card. But Dart's got some wins more recently, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, if we were marking each practice, like if there's been 11 practices, probably like 6-5 or 7-4. It's pretty close. Where those guys are, and even if it's 7-4, the wins and losses are really close too. So I think Miller was very good the first week, and Dart was struggling a little bit with his confidence, but I think he's bounced back. He made a really nice play today. Feeling the pressure coming from his front side, and was backpedaling and throws, an off-platform throw, and showing the arm strength he has down the seam. Michael Trigg coming across, and Trigg makes a very nice hands catch again up over a defender, but a really nice throw, really nice catch as well. And that's the type of gunslinger mentality the Jackson Dart has for you, but he can get himself in trouble a little bit too.
Yeah.
Rapid fire, Shotty.
That was kind of not really.
We got a question from Mark, and I'm going to read it anyway. He says, is Jalen McKenzie actually looking as improved as the two Clays are claiming, or are we just seeing an early front runner for the 2021 Keely Eure Ben Griffiths Unwarranted Hype Award? Here's the thing, Mark. It was warranted. I promise you. I promise you.
I never saw Ben Griffith punt that well. I don't know what Keely saw.
Ryan.
That's a lie.
That's a lie.
Are you hyping up Jalen McKenzie or something? Like what's?
No, it's just he's wondering if Jalen McKenzie is getting hyped up too much.
I mean, he's been hyped up. Like you've seen him on the field a whole bunch of times. I think it hypes him up that you haven't seen.
McGuire and Clay said that Bobby Steiner and the boys have really worked with McKenzie over the offseason. He apparently cleaned up some cartilage in his knee. He's using more of his core power. His hips are less tight, stuff like that. So I think that they're saying it's a new and improved Jalen McKenzie.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, he's definitely in the mix there, but I don't know. Yeah,
I think he's improved. I'm not watching him every play. I'm trying to watch that left tackle spot a little bit more, just as far as volume of snaps. But I think the times I've been watching Jalen McKenzie, I think he's improved. Is he improved enough that he's locked down a spot? No, and I think that's because those two redshirt freshmen are further along than definitely I anticipated.
John says conference realignment, USC's ideal situation going forward. Which schools would comprise the ideal next iteration of the Western States Football Conference?
I don't know what he means by that. Does he mean like add teams to the Pac-12, or what is he?
Just what do you do with realignment if you're USC?
Well, USC's in a power position. They everything can happen for USC. USC can stay where they are and get a better deal in the Pac-12. USC can go to the Big Ten and make $55 million a year on a TV contract, or USC could explore going independent and try to get their own deal and control their Tier 3 rights and all the other rights. So USC's in a power spot, but it's not like they need to figure, they're not going to be at the whim of whatever the West Coast does. Like if they don't like what the direction the Pac-12 is going, they can go somewhere else. And there's definitely going to be a lot of suitors to bring USC in.
Gordon says, how about putting Liam Jimmons back to defensive line?
No.
I think
he's going to be a starter.
Yeah.
Yeah. We got multiple questions about Josh Jackson. We reported yesterday that he went down on an awkward play, and Todd Orlando was asked about it today after practice, and he didn't seem concerned. He said if he had his choice, both Corey Foreman and Josh Jackson will be back next week. So it didn't seem as serious as it looked on yesterday.
Yeah, it was special teams play. The first time we've seen him return a punt and bangs his knee or whatever, drops the ball, has to get helped off the field, was on the field for quite a while. He's one of my favorites. I like him out there. I think he's got a real chance to start because like people pencil in Isaac Taylor Stewart, but he's missing practice for a variety of different reasons, and he has been. I think he's a great player, but you got to be available, and Josh Jackson has been until this knee injury.
Guy on Facebook said, I've been very disappointed with the use of tight ends in the recent years. With the recent injury to Epps, what is the current pecking order for the tight ends and the chances that they would see more action?
I mean, I think Cromanhook is still the number one. I mean, he's the guy that you can trust the most to block. Now, who else can you trust to block, I think, determines the rest of it. And, we're seeing some different looks. We're seeing Trigg in the slot. If you're looking at the pass-catching options, I think Trigg has been the most consistent guy there, especially the last couple practices. Jude Wolfe has also been a good option. Ethan Ray, we saw him back doing some one-on-one, some competitive periods yesterday, and looked really good catching the ball and making defenders miss. So I don't know how far along he is to actually joining as far as team and how long it'll take him to get caught up on everything. But just keep an eye on him. That room is deep. Josh Follows made some catches as well. But I think ultimately it comes back to blocking. That's the guy that's going to stay on the field for USC. And right now, Cromanhook's still the front runner out there, I think.
Yeah.
Brandon on Facebook says, out of the defense and the offense, which one will be the strength of USC and why?
I think the defense, I just have more confidence in them right now. I think there's less question marks. Yeah, there's some interior defensive line questions, but they got some options there. I just like the way that they've progressed. I could see this offense still be effective, but not be able to run the football again. And for me, that you couldn't be a championship caliber offense if that's the way you're going to be. You can win games. I think the defense is going to be closer to a championship caliber defense. So I'm going to go defense.
I'm going to go defense, but I think there's still plenty of questions on the defense, too.
There is, but I'd say less than.
I just think they've been more consistent. That's the question. That's still the issue I have with the offense.
And speaking of questions for the defense, Raphael has one. He says, who do you think the starters are going to be on for the defensive backs?
I mean, Chris Steele seems to be, is locked in there. I think Isaac Taylor Stewart, when he gets back, he's made some plays. Just got to get him back on the field. I think he's bound for a big season. Deg actually asked, is ITS ready to become the elite cornerback he was projected to be? I think he's ready to take that step. We'll see. But, from some of the plays he's been able to make. So I think that's your two cornerbacks. Depending on how many safeties you want to put on the field, you could put 5 or 6 because they can do a lot of different things. There's a lot of different bodies that do different things. Chris Thompson has been a monster coming in the box and making some big hits, coming off the edge, pass rushing. But I think it comes back to those 3 veterans of Greg Johnson, Chase Williams, and Isaiah Paul-Mao. I think someone's got to push them out of one of those spots. There's just a lot of talented guys that do different things. But unless you want to put 5 guys in there, I think those 3 are likely to be the starters at least game 1.
Yeah, Josh Jackson can slip in there. We'll see.
Michael says, can USC finally win the turnover battle this year?
I mean, they did last year. They're one of the best in the country.
Yeah. So, yes.
The big question there will be, can they do it without Talanoa Hufanga?
Yeah.
Who was at practice today?
Yeah. Everyone was very excited to see him, too. It's always great when people love former teammates. Cam said, how athletic do our linebackers look this year? We have been lacking at that position athletically for a while, ?
Raymond Scott's athletic. I mean, he's, he played some safety and stuff, too. And I like what I've seen from Goforth and Kanai Malga. It'd be great to see a Solomon Tuliupupu out there, but he's big, strong, fast, all that kind of stuff. But I think it's going to be an improved group. But it's Todd Orlando's group. I think he's going to take that personally. He wants that group to perform, and I think you're going to see some better performance out of them.
You can include Drake Jackson and Hunter Eccles as well. Those are athletic guys that can drop into coverage and do some different things. I talked to Todd Orlando today, and he said the 3 linebackers that Kanai's more suited for the middle. He's going to be your run stuffer, going to be the guy in the box. He said Raymond Scott's more suited for the outside, and he said Raylan Goforth is a guy that can do either. So I think that's why you're still seeing a 3-man rotation there, and you may even see some rotation in the game,
sure.
Rather than just a straight cutoff of they decide on starters and those guys are the only ones that play because of the different things they do. He said Kanai Malga is really good first and second down, and they're working on him becoming a better 3-down linebacker. So maybe you see it where he's subbed out on third downs, or if you see something like that, I'm not sure exactly yet.
Keith wanted to know over under 15 catches for tight end Michael Trigg this year. Taking over.
Lot of options. But so far, right now, I would go over. But I'll change my mind next week.
Under.
Ryan, interesting.
Ooh.
Okay.
I mean, anyone outside? I would probably say under for anyone outside of, of Drake London.
He's the only one that's getting 15.
For the year?
Wow, how do you know? any one of these guys could just like play 3 snaps a game. Like it's just, we don't know anybody. Like,
So
I think your better odds are in the under of all of the guys outside of Drake London.
now, will they throw the ball to tight ends? That's a big question. This offense type of thing. But Bryce Dixon is the last freshman that Michael Trigger reminds me of as far as just a tight end you think should get some opportunities just because of his playmaking ability. He had 14 for 198 his freshman year. So
Interesting.
could be
Who's
right
the
on it.
quarterback?
Yeah.
2014, that was Kessler, I believe.
Kessler, yeah.
14 is under. And that was
But he also had 4 touchdowns in that.
That was it doesn't matter. We're talking
7
about
games.
catches.
Add extra points for that. On this. A big T37 says, how is Taylor Katoa looking?
He's actually been out he got banged up yesterday and was on Rehab Island today. I just don't think he's going to be a guy that's in the mix right now. I think Rajon Davis is probably the next guy after those 3 that we talked about.
He's made some plays, yeah.
Maybe to Asivi Nomura. That guy he hits people. Every time he's in there at linebacker, he just hits somebody. So, I don't know. He might be the guy that, like you're talking about with the defense. They're like, we don't care, just go hit something. And he's the guy like, all right, I got you, coach. I can go hit something. That's for sure.
Speaking of Rajon Davis, Eddie wanted to know, why is he not a day 1 starter?
Because there's people in front of him.
They're
True freshman.
Because you have a coordinator who is the linebackers coach. That means the linebackers get a ton put on them, which is why I think the linebackers were a little slow last year to really catch up with the defense. So I think that's part of it. Now, he does a lot of unique things. They can rush him off the edge and do some different things with him. So you might see him in some sub packages as well.
Yeah, he's great. I mean, he's a great player, but it'd probably take him a little time.
We've gotten a lot of questions about Kyrie Colbert and his recruiting ability. I'm putting that nicely as far as what people have asked. What is your take on that whole situation?
I mean, so if you want to defend Kyrie Colbert, you go, okay, Manjack was what? Not the highest ranked player in this class, and he is an absolute stud. So now USC's used to just get the 5-star guys on the West Coast. Now, if you get someone that wasn't ranked as high but comes in and performs like a Marquise Lee or something, you're like, okay, whatever, you're getting your guy. I think everyone was asking about Manjack this week, and they're talking about, well, you just watch the tape. Kyrie Colbert talked about, like, check out the tape. I mean, I don't care about stars. I watch the tape because he's catching 4 touchdowns a game. So yeah, I think he's done a pretty good job at some of the guys they brought in. Like, you're looking at guys that maybe weren't the highest ranked, but still look like they're good players. But I think USC, that's one thing you can do with your eyes closed is recruit 5-star wide receivers. So I think you need to be able to do that too. But at least the guys he's bringing in are performing.
Yeah, Michael Jackson as well is another guy, and it's perfectly fine to go out and find other players that aren't as rated as high. Deontay Burnett was a guy that T. Martin saw there and was like, this guy just keeps making plays at practice, and so that's the guy that they ended up bringing in late. But those are the guys that USC was bringing in late, while they were also getting the Robert Woods, the Marquise Lees, and those guys, the Juju Smith-Schusters. You need to be able to close the highly rated guys that are local because they have connections. They love USC. Mekhi Lemon, grown up a USC fan, those type players. And then you can go and find the other guys, and whether that takes you to Vegas or Texas or wherever, that's fine. But if you have highly rated guys, their tape doesn't lie either.
Yeah.
You got to be able to pull them in.
Yeah.
We got a question from Tony who says, which true freshman will be a starter besides Corey Foreman?
Don't know if Corey will be. Is there any true freshmen that are going to start? I don't think so.
I mean, Michael Trigg, maybe. That's the one guy that, depending on what you're looking at, what kind of formations and packages you're trying to use, that's a guy potentially. But other than that, I think it's going to be a couple games down the road. Now, depending if some guys get banged up or whatnot, but I think a couple games down the road, you may see some of those guys pushing a little bit more for either extra playing time or some starting opportunities.
And there's guys on the edge that, like, if someone gets hurt, they'll be thrust into the role. But as of now, I don't think they're going to be.
Kalen Bullock is a guy to keep an eye on.
Oh, yeah.
Everyone is talking about him and his range and his twitchiness. And one of the things that stood out from Todd Orlando talking about him today was talking about how he just has a natural vision of the field, and he can get from place to place. He said they got to put more, put weight on him and whatnot. But he's a guy to keep an eye on because he keeps making some plays in practice as well, and he can move to a couple different positions. So, depending on who all is available that first game, if someone's banged up or something, he could get in there as well at one of the safety spots.
Randy says, if you had to guess right now, is this going to be a breakout season for USC or just more of the same?
I mean, your safe bet's going to be more of the same, but the problem is more of the same could be 10-2. Like, literally, the schedule is that much easier that they could play pretty poorly. They could have a game against Washington State where they don't have any rushing yards in the fourth quarter and still win by 3 touchdowns or whatever. They could have some games like that where you're just still like, well, you won, but it doesn't feel great. But you do that throughout the schedule, and at the end of the year, you're 10-2. And how do you feel about it? So I feel like it can be more of the same. It's probably more likely.
I think they'll be better, but I'm not willing to call it a breakout yet.
Yeah.
Coley wanted to know, as the press, do you see a difference in Coach Helton? Is he more accessible? Is he saying the same things as in years past, or do you sense a difference in him?
He hasn't changed, I don't think.
Same.
Yeah, same.
Blaze wanted to know, he had 2 questions. Is today moving day for USC? It was, lots of traffic. And he said, is this SC band practicing now? They are, and they even made an appearance at USC's practice today.
Yeah, they did. I think they started camp on Sunday. So they are back, and it's Jacob, I forget his last name, the new band director. So Art Bartner is retired, and Jacob, I'm sorry I'm forgetting his last name, but he's the new band director.
I love move-in day, by the way. Just saying.
It's no.
I always avoid practice on move-in day, by the way.
Is that your strategy today, Ryan?
Well, no, because I've set up the show, and I thought, but I try to always avoid move-in day because it's a nightmare.
Move-in day makes me miss college because I used to help everyone move in as an RA.
Oh, yeah.
No, I literally passed the buckets, and I was like, I'm so glad I don't have to do that. It was so torturous.
Yesterday there was people moving in, but it was like a taste of it. Then today I'm sure it was worse.
Yes. Tim has a question, and it's also a credit to your branding, Shotgun. He said, I know it's early, but has the addition of McGuire, Bobby Steiner, and the boys, and a year more of experience made this line play better than last year's line?
I think they're making strides. I don't want to say they're good, but they are definitely better than where they were last year, I think. And I feel like it's still up and down a little bit with the run game in particular and a little bit with the pass pro. But the last few days, I think the pass protection has been much better. We only had a couple. I think there was 2 sacks yesterday. Today, there was only a couple as well. So I think the pass pro, and that's talking about first string, second string, third string. So, even the younger guys getting in there, I think it's getting better. And, talking with the players, they've talked about the intensity that Clay McGuire brings to practice and also how much he is pushing physicality. And, from that veteran guys who, getting feels like straightforward answers from them, they feel like the group is getting better too. And again, like I said, the ability to actually hang out with each other off the field and just building that camaraderie, that chemistry, which they weren't able to do, and they really needed those camps last year with so many people changing positions and moving into the starting lineup before the 2020 season.
We got a question from Walker Lamer who says, who and what will be the source of grit and passion on this team? That person who won't let the Trojans lose.
Ooh.
I think the first name that stands out to me is Isaiah Palmel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's popping in my head, but
I think he'll be a captain, and I think that everyone really trusts his leadership. Everyone I talked to from the safety group has mentioned Isaiah Palmel and what he means to that group. So I think he's the guy that it starts with.
Yeah.
Another guy would be Kenai Malga would stand out as well.
Interesting.
So much energy.
I've heard Nick Figueroa be mentioned as far as like a defensive leader. I also just think Chase Williams has kind of jumped in the IPM train of being that leader. It's interesting because Orlando makes the defense line up before they enter the field, and now some of the DBs have like linked arms when they go in. It's interesting. They've kind of evolved there.
Chase Williams also before the scrimmage on Saturday, kind of pulled up to the group and talked to the defense before, so showing his leadership again.
DEGG says, is ITS ready to become the elite cornerback he was projected to be?
I answered this one already, but yes.
Oh, my bad.
So.
yeah.
We had a question from Goldstein who said, will it be Voorhees or Ford protecting Slovis's blind side this season?
Well, it'll be Ford or Monheim, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen Voorhees get some left tackle reps, but, I talked to him, and, he says he feels more comfortable at guard because he's played more there. He has that experience. So I think that he's better suited as a guard. I think those other guys have a little bit more athleticism, can get out against some of those quick rushers on the edge. But if you have to throw him in there, he has some experience there from his freshman year playing tackle as well. So I think that it's a good backup option to have, but I think he's better suited for guard. So I think it's going to be Ford or Monheim, like Ryan said.
Brandon wanted to know, will USC be one of the most penalized teams again this year?
Probably. It's hard to change that stuff.
I will say they are implementing accountability a lot more this year as far as you jump off sides, you're getting pulled out of the game and you're doing up downs or pulling out of the practice. You false start. We've seen even centers. You don't usually want to change a center with a first or second team. Andrew Millick, had a false start where I guess he moved the ball or something. Ref throws a flag, yanked out of there. They throw somebody else in there. So I think that that accountability is only going to help them. And again, that's identifying areas where you've struggled and trying to make changes at least.
Right, but they're still going to be highly penalized.
It is the Pac-12 after all.
It is.
I'm going to jump to our final caller of the night and then do maybe a couple more questions.
No couple more questions.
It's
Just
Ron
your call.
from Santa Cruz. Hello, you're live on Tunnel Vision.
Hi. First of all, I want to say that I'm probably the oldest person alive watching, rooting for the Trojans. I started watching them when I was 15 years old, and I'm 90 now.
Wow.
90
Nice,
years
Ron.
old,
Thank you for
and,
calling in.
Well, you're welcome. I'm really crazy about Southern California, and before I ask my question, I just want to say the one I remember most running, one of the best running backs I've ever seen was or heard about was John Arnett, and nobody mentions him because that was so many years ago. But I've got a couple of questions. I want to ask whether or not they're going to use number 60, which is Maximus Gibbs, 390 pounds, and he's listed on the roster, which I've got in front of me at offensive line, and I've seen clips of him on television or on my iPad here, and that's pretty darn good for an offensive lineman, but he's pretty heavy. He's big, and my thought was, if he doesn't pan out as an offensive lineman, are they going to consider him to make him a nose tackle? He would be a great nose tackle for the Trojans if he can play a little bit of defense. He's going to take up an awful lot of space. So I wonder if that's been considered.
So he's someone that probably needs to change his body for the next year or so coming into USC. I mean, you might have saw him on that. I love that he's using his iPad. He's 90 years old. That's
Ron,
great.
you're great. Call in all the time.
Yeah, I love it, Ron. But yeah, I think Ron, he needs a year of seasoning. I think with with diet and exercise is probably something that's going to be on the schedule. I haven't heard anyone talk about him moving over to the defensive side of the ball. Usually it's the other way around if it's someone that's not panning out. But he's a big body, probably going to play guard for USC down the road. But I think he needs to get in better shape, lose some weight, and I think a year with Bobby Steiner and the boys, that'll help him.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that's a developmental player for you. I don't think that he's a defensive guy in the future, even if he struggles, because a lot of times those guys that switch sides played both sides in high school. He only played guard because he's playing at St. John Bosco. You don't go both ways at St. John Bosco because of how much talent they have. But he's a guy that's already down to probably 360, I think is where he's around now, 360, 370. So he's been putting in the work there. It's just got to be a continual effort. In the off season has to be the effort. He can't lack on it and be like, oh, I'm out of season and I got to go back to, eating really heavily or whatever. So it's going to be continual work and just molding that body, not just losing weight, but molding it and adding the strength. And that's something I think is coming for all those offensive linemen. They've talked about it a lot. One of the things that Jalen McKenzie said was really interesting is about, Robert Steiner and the work that his staff has done is that they're working the tiny muscles. And that, you would think that doesn't make any sense. You need to work the big muscles, right? They're working the big muscles. But he said, when you're locking out as an offensive lineman, you don't need just your pec and just your shoulder. You need all these small muscles that are in your shoulder as well, all the AC muscles and those type of things around that joint. And he said that's something that the new staff is doing really well and is different from what they've had in the past. So I thought that was really interesting. They said that. And he said he feels stronger. He says you can see it on the field as well.
All right.
Well, thank you, Ron, for the call. We appreciate you. Make sure to call in.
Did want to point out, John Arnett, great USC Trojan, College Football Hall of Fame from the 50s, I want to say.
I'm about to give a history lesson here,
okay,
Shotgun.
go for it.
He played at USC from 1954 to 1956. He was the second pick in the 1957 draft. He played with the Rams from 1957 to 1963, and then he went to the Chicago Bears 1964 to 1966. 5-time Pro Bowler. So there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did want to point out he was both a USC College Football Hall of Famer at USC, but then went to the LA Rams. This is before they moved and then moved back. But, so a double LA legend.
Yeah.
There you go. Thank you for the history lesson, Ron. Alrighty, guys. Bossman, you say no more questions.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up.
final thoughts before we wrap this one up.
This is the end of camp coming up here. We're going to have the scrimmage, and then it's going to be like a weird mock game week kind of thing or whatever going into. And we got college football like just around the corner.
So
I'm
excited.
very excited for it. So looking forward to all of it.
Yes.
My final thoughts are answering two last questions. Cam asked, Carrie Angeline had a good career at NC State. How do we keep a good athlete like Trigg to stay at USC, unlike Angeline? The position coach talking to the player usually helps.
Yeah.
So we'll start with that. That would be a good one.
You don't have the special teams coach coaching them and never talking to them. So, yes.
Another comment about Trigg. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's most likely Michael Trigg carrying 100 people on his back. From Daniel. And the last question from Big T was, how would you compare Kajani Wright to Metu, Big O, and Evan Mobley? Who is he most similar to? Basketball 5-star commit that they got last week. I would say he's closest to Chimezie Metu, a guy that can develop and become a much better player when he gets to USC as well, along with the talents that he already has. Not quite the talent that Evan Mobley is, because no one's going to be that type guy. And he's a physical guy in a similar fashion to Onyeka Okongwu, but he doesn't have tree trunks for thighs like Onyeka did. So I don't know that he's going to be able to come in and bang, and be as physical as a true freshman as Onyeka was. But I think he's a guy that could be a multi-year guy at USC and could show some real big development from year 1 to year 2.
Alrighty, be sure to stay tuned to USCfootball.com. We have so much coverage of USC's fall camp, so make sure you go there. But that's going to wrap it up for tonight's episode. That's Ryan. That's Shaka, and I'm Keely. We'll see y'all next time.